We're going to start, if you don't mind. I'm Richard Kessel. I used to work with Stan Klimberg. That's my Hall of Fame life. Now, it's good to see Stan. It's a pleasure to be here to be moderating this. I was formerly the chairman and CEO of LIPA, when it was LIPA, and it's good to have Neil Lewis, a former trustee. Unfortunately, not when I was at LIPA. I would love to have him on my board. Stan was my general counsel. He got me through all of the murky times that we had. But it's a pleasure to be here. And our panel, we're going to talk about the future of energy on Long Island. And what I want to do is, I want to have each of our panelists, Mike Ruiz from National Grid, Neil Lewis from the Sustainability Institute at Molloy College, and Ross Hain from Caithness, to just give a brief introduction of themselves. Just 2 minutes each. Then I want to kind of set the stage for a discussion, and then we'll start for a discussion. Maybe each person will speak 7 to 10 minutes. Work?
I have a slideshow too.
Okay, 7 to 10 minutes, and then we'll take any questions that you might have. So let me have Ross introduce himself, then Michael, then Neil.
Thank you, Richie. It's a pleasure to be here. Richie was the chairman of LIPA when Caithness participated in an RFP in 2003 for new generation by 2006. And of course, it came on, we were one of 16 projects to participate. LIPA selected 2, the Neptune cable, 660 megawatt cable from Sayreville, New Jersey into Newbridge in Nassau. And they selected the Caithness project in Yaphank, the first new state-of-the-art baseload project to be built on Long Island since Northport 4 was built in 1978. So I've been very active on that, and also on trying to put forward a second project that was selected in a second LIPA RFP out of 45 proposals that is still undergoing review in the processes at the new LIPA/PSE&G Long Island.
Thank you, Ross. Michael?
Thanks, Ross. Thanks. Richie, I'm Mike Ruiz, Director of Community Customer Management, and you can tell I'm struggling with a little bit of laryngitis. Just what's happened yesterday. Anyway, responsible for not only Long Island, but also New York City. My team and myself, we manage our top 1,000 customers in both jurisdictions. And we also do a lot of community outreach within our footprint.
Well, hi everybody. My name is Neil Lewis. I am the Executive Director of Sustainability Institute at Molloy College. I am a member of the Vision Long Island Board of Directors, a great organization to be a part of it. Andrew Mann and myself teach a class at Molloy College on Introduction to Sustainability, and our programs include, we do a film series, a number of people know us through that. We also run a Clean Energy Leadership Task Force, which is an effort to work with local governments on promoting energy efficiency. And just last week, we launched an initiative called Long Island Green Homes. We have a table here today. I encourage you to stop by the table. We want to get everybody to get a home energy audit done and talk to you about that kind of thing if you stop by the table.
Thanks, Neil. Let me just introduce 2 other people in the audience quickly. First, Mike Waltashek. Now, the reason is because when I came back to LIPA, I was fired I don't remember how many, but I was fired a few times. Mike was on the board when I came back, and good to have you here, Mike. Mike is a great board member. Very much appreciate your help. And also Larry Levy. Now, Larry has 2 identifications, at least in one thing about me. I've got history that people don't know, and things that happen, and people don't have any idea. Now, Larry's claim to fame today is he's the head of the Suburban Institute. Is that what it's called? National Center for Suburban Studies at Hofstra University. And a great guy, friend, longtime friend. Larry and I go back longer than I think anyone in this room. First of all, Larry was a great columnist and member of the editorial board. And before that, a reporter at Newsday. Before that, Larry was a reporter for the New York Times Long Island section, and covered me in the Merritt Library, actually brought his girlfriend to a presentation, and I was trying to raise money for my group, which Larry knew was just me, but and his girlfriend actually donated $5. $5, yeah. He'll never, what the hell are you doing? Exactly.
He was so persuaded.
Yeah, right. Well, you could fool some people. So it's good, Larry. It's great to see you, to have you here today. So I want to frame the argument and look at history. Energy has, from my perspective, has always had a huge play here on Long Island. I think up until recently, it was a very significant issue. A lot of people, believe it or not, a lot of people who moved to Long Island recently don't even remember Lilco, believe it or not. But many of us do, the Long Island Lining Company, and all the controversy surrounding rapes, and of course the construction of the Shoreham nuclear power plant, and all of the opposition. Again, people don't remember history, but most of Long Island was very much for Shoreham until after two events, one of them being Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, and the other being Hurricane Gloria and Lilco's inadequate and untimely response to that storm. As a result of that, most of Long Island opposed Shoreham. There's a huge controversy. Governor Cuomo stepped in, and ultimately, although he may rest in peace, a wonderful guy and a great friend, I worked for him for many years, he always said he had nothing to do with closing Shoreham, and I don't argue with him because you get your head taken off. But anyway, the windup was that the Long Island Power Authority, LIPA, was created, began, I think, Stan in 1987. Stan, I think, was the first executive director of LIPA. I'm not the first chairman of LIPA, Bill Mack was, but I was on the board, first trustee on the board, and we served, believe it or not, for a number of years. Our job was to implement and decommission the settlement and decommission the Shoreham nuclear power plant, which was, I think, the first commercially licensed nuclear plant in the country to be decommissioned, decontaminated. Was quite an experience, a number of years. And after that, Governor Cuomo was defeated by George Pataki, who became governor. I would say at the beginning, not one of our greatest allies. He did fire me twice from LIPA, but ultimately brought me back, decided to go forward with the takeover, became a great supporter, right, Stan, of LIPA and what we did. And LIPA became Long Island's electric company in May of 1998. So LIPA has been around since 1998. And there was a lot of controversy at the time about the takeover. But early on, and this is kind of bringing us to the present, the big crisis on Long Island was not having enough power to keep the lights on. We inherited a very bankrupt, decrepit system from the Long Island Lighting Company, which I'm not get into all that anymore, but they didn't maintain the system. They put all their money into Shoreham. And I always laugh, just as a sidebar, that everyone now talks about the PSC, Public Service Commission, how we need them. The old PSC at the time was the ones that approved all the rate increases so Lilco could build Shoreham and ultimately become a $6 billion boondoggle for Long Island. Now all of a sudden we need them. I don't know, it's a different PSC, so we'll leave it at that. But the bottom line is that we did face a tremendous crisis. We did have the highest rates in the country. We were able, through a lot of different methods, to lower those rates, give people refunds, which I know Larry was a big fan of, the news they loved so much. The bottom line was that we faced an energy crisis of unprecedented proportions. There was one summer in particular that we remember where we barely made it through the week. We had an enormous heat wave. The lights, I don't know how we kept them on. Governor Pataki, to his credit, helped work with us to build a number of plants on an emergency basis, I think 11 small generating plants on Long Island for the Rockaways out to the East End and on the North Shore. and mostly by private companies, I think one by the New York Power Authority. And then we also wound up building the Crosstown Cable, which was the first major transmission line connecting Long Island to the grid that had been built. And that was followed, as Ross indicated, by an RFP competitive process. Caithness 1 was built, and as was the Neptune cable under the Atlantic Ocean. I would just say, at the time, we needed every megawatt we could get to keep the lights on. I know a lot of revisionist history people who say we have too many contracts and too much power. That's absurd. But they don't know the history of Long Island, and the fact of the matter is that if we hadn't built those projects and entered into those contracts, the lights would have gone out. And I can tell you one thing, the worst thing that could happen to Long Island is the lights going out because you don't have enough energy. One thing if you have a storm, and we all know we went through a number of storms, nothing like Hurricane Sandy, but I think Sandy taught us a real lesson. But those are things you can't prevent, the lights going out. And but if the lights go out because you don't have enough power, then you've got a whole different story, not just as a discredit to the utility involved, LIPA or whoever it is, but also it's terrible for the economy of Long Island. If businesses don't know, if people don't know that they can depend upon keeping the lights on, then the economy is sunk. And our economy is fighting right now, and that's the last thing we need. So again, to set the stage for the future, you know, I read a lot of things. One thing I have not done since I left LIPA yet is I've never publicly written or criticized anything that's been done by my successors at LIPA, Keyspan, National Grid, good company, PSEG. I don't want to do that. Shouldn't be my role yet. But having said that, I think that a lot of people say things that don't understand the history of energy on Long Island. And that's because they weren't here, or they weren't involved in it. And the fact of the matter is that when you look at what we've experienced, and you don't remember it and learn from it, the same thing is going to happen all over again. So that brings me to today's panel. And I want to kind of frame the question. Each of these gentlemen are going to make a presentation, and then we'll have questions. But I want to frame the kind of debate this way. There are three things. My lesson was there are three things that are critical to Long Island's energy future: cost, supply, and environment. And those are the three big things. And not necessarily in that order. Although, you know, rates for many years was the most important thing. Now, they are still important. And just let me differentiate between rates and bills. You know, the rates have been frozen for 3 years, not the bills. And I think it was a very interesting sleight of hand to try to convince people that somehow the bills weren't going to go up by freezing rates. I think people don't understand that the electric bill has a lot of components, but the two major components are the rates, which is the cost of delivering and producing electricity, and the fuel, and that depends upon the price of fuel. Just to give you, when we took over Loco, a barrel of oil was about $16. A few years later, it was $145. It can go up and down. Natural gas, of course, now is a big component. And that goes up and down based upon the cost of fuel at the time. There's no profit made on it, technically, certainly not by LIPA. But people should understand that whether you freeze rates or not is not as important as the bill. And the truth is, under LIPA, if I remember correctly, rates have only gone up twice in 16 years, or is it 17 years now? And I think the total amount of rates going up, Neil, was under 4%.
Right,
So
less
both,
than 2 each time.
right, less than 2 each time. By the way, under us, Dan, we never raised the rates at all. The bill went up because of higher fuel costs, but not the rates. Now there is obviously a process in place to raise rates for 3 years. And so issue number one is the cost. There's been a rate process. Now the PSC is out there. We didn't have the PSC to deal with, thankfully. The PSC is there, but it doesn't regulate the rates. It only makes recommendations. The PSC has recommended 3 years of very small rate increases. I'm not saying they should be adopted or not. And the LIPA board will ultimately make that decision soon. So one of the questions is the cost of the electric bill on Long Island. And how does whatever these gentlemen do and others do affect that cost? Because the cost of energy is one of the reasons why a lot of people are leaving. They're going to different states, businesses are leaving all the time, and it's not all the cost of energy, but the cost of energy is paralyzing out here. It's in the top 5 or 6 in the entire United States of America. Our kilowatt hour charge is around 20 cents a kilowatt hour, maybe 20.5 cents, which is expensive. Not as expensive as Con Ed, but of course most of Con Ed's service territory, small apartments. So the bills, and that's an example, the bills in Con Ed service territory, the average bill is much less than the average bill here on Long Island, even though the rates are higher, because the space that people occupy is smaller. So the first issue is cost. How do we strive to try and deliver the lowest cost of energy that we can, struggling with the fact that our rates are very high. It's something I hear all over the place. Most people still think I headlight, so they come over to me all the time and complain. Even Larry does it, he forgot. But that's the first issue. The second issue is supply. And there's a huge debate going on right now on Long Island. It's a debate that may be a little bit more internal than it should be about whether we need additional supply, when we need it, and how we should get it. What are the competing forces? You've got generating plants, the baseload plants, other than Caithness, which was built recently, are significantly old. They're very old, and they're falling apart. And the 3 major plants that I'm talking about are Barrett, Port Jefferson, and Northport. Northport was the most recent plant that was built. But the bottom line is they're all old, they're all falling apart, they're inefficient, they're polluting, they kill fish, they're bad for water, but you've got them operating and you can't just eliminate them, you won't have enough energy. So you've got that problem. You've got a lot of smaller peak plants that are now running, in many instances, year-round. And of course you have Caithness one, which is the newest plant, which operates year-round. So the first question is, do we need more resources? PSEG has indicated that we might not need new resources until at least 2024, and I've heard recently they've gone as far as 2027. That date has changed a number of times. And then there's a question about what is a new resource. Is it a project like Caithness, or is it repowering? By the way, something that I should have probably done, and Stan knows we had some opportunities to do repowering. We instead went with Caithness and Neptune. I'm glad we did. I'm very proud of that, but maybe we should have looked at some repowering earlier on. The question becomes, what do we need, and when do we need it, and how much is it going to cost also? The third issue is what about the energy efficiency and renewables, which are so critical? I'm glad to see David here because we started together with Empower Solar, a great company, and we started the Solar Pioneer program. I remember when we had 1,000 units that was considered like a huge thing. Now solar has become a big industry on Long Island. But what about, what is the place for renewables on Long Island? I hope Neil will talk a little bit about it. And energy efficiency. The Cuomo administration and the PSC, to their credit, have started proceedings, REV and REV 2.0, I guess it's all combined now, about the need for energy efficiency, the need for solar energy and renewables and wind. Just notice I am wearing a wind tie today with windmills on it. We should have done the offshore wind project. We had it. Governor Spitzer came in and stopped it. I thought it was one of the stupidest things ever. We would have had that project operating today. We would have been the first in North America. But other decisions were made. I think the days of wind on Long Island and offshore wind are over, despite what some people say. I wish they weren't. But what's the role for the renewables on Long Island in terms of the environment and the cost in particular? Can we afford them? And how much should we do? And the other question is, does renewables replace the need for fossil generation, et cetera? So those are the three issues that I think face us. And we're going to be looking to answer them next year. I give PSEG a lot of credit because they've started an integrated resource plan process, taking a little longer than I think people expected. But they're looking at how does all this integrate together. And I gather that is going to be come out sometime next year, probably in the second quarter is what I understand, hopefully. We'll give some guidance as to where we go. But we need a lot of public input. So with that, I'm going to ask Mike Ruiz from National Grid to speak first, Ross Ain from Caithness second, and Neil Lewis third. Ask each of them to take around 7 minutes, 8 minutes of presentation, and then we'll have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Mike, good to see you.
First thing, I want to just make it clear that there's also gas on Long Island.
Yes, I should have.
A
Yes,
lot of electric talk. So my presentation will be about the gas system and our investment on Long Island. First, in terms of cost, I know Rich spoke about the electricity costs. We've frozen our bills, our delivery charge for the last 8 years, and they have been frozen. To Bridget's point, there have been charges on the bill. Most recently, last year, we were allowed to invest an additional $400 million into the gas infrastructure on Long Island. With that came a surcharge to the customer's bill in the neighborhood of $1. So overall, $1 overall on the bill. So when you look at the amount of investment that we were doing, and that's what happens when you freeze your rates, the investment never stops. We still have a system that is aging, a system that we have to modify, we have to upgrade, and also we have a commodity on the island that is in such high demand that we have to grow the system. I'm not sure many people know that our system, when you look at it comparatively, it's a very, 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 very small system. It's very good from east to west, but that's where the low pockets are, actually north to south. So in order to build out that system, it's extremely expensive, and most of the customers that are requesting our commodity gas are one-family homes, two-family homes, and the amount of infrastructure, anyone here can do the math, it's just not a very lucrative way of increasing revenue and profits. But anyway, we have been working the Public Service Commission. This $400 million that we're investing gives us the ability to do things that we couldn't do in the old regulatory structure. So one example is, as I mentioned, the high ask for our product. We've had neighborhoods that have come to us and said, if I get 50 of my neighbors, 100 of my neighbors to convert at the same time, can we bring the infrastructure in? So of course we take it back and look at it, and most times the answer would be no. It just isn't enough in terms of creating that type of infrastructure, that type of investment, unfortunately. But just recently, as part of this 2-year extension with the Public Service Commission, we're allowed to pilot programs where we have done studies over the years, which has led us to really narrow down where are the real low pockets. And one of the neighborhoods was East Hills in Nassau County. And what we found was that we have a total of 1,000 customers that can convert. And we found that the break point was 400 customers to convert. So we took that to the Public Service Commission, we sat with them, and we said, at this point, we think that if we put the infrastructure in place, they will come. So build it, they will come. And the commission agreed. And because when you think about it, that's truly one of the only ways to really build out the system on Long Island. And what does that do for a particular neighborhood? Now you have the gas infrastructure, which you talked about how expensive energy is and what in terms of a decision-making point it is for a company that's trying to come into Long Island and stay and grow in Long Island is the cost of energy. Now, someone looks at it, there's an opportunity to build move their business to East Hills, gas infrastructure is there. So getting back to the project, we 70,000 foot main. So when you think about it, it's a huge project. It'll be the largest project on Long Island in quite some time. But we're allowed to do it. We're going to start it next year, and we hope to have it completed within a year and a half. And as we build the infrastructure, customers will come on. We hope to be able to, over the next 2 years, as this agreement commission unfolds, we'll have that implemented. So that's what the cost of, that's what has made us, freezing our rates, has made us go in and think things differently. Unfortunately, the climate isn't where you could go in every year and raise rates. So, I'm not raising. The other thing I want to talk about is supply. We talked about supply. And I know there's a lot of talk. We recently completed what we call the Brooklyn-Queens Interconnect. And it actually came in through the Rockaways, but it actually will benefit Long Island and also our New York City territory. It's the first new supply that we've had in our system in 50 years. Just goes to show that the region is in need of supply. With that project, we should be okay in terms of our forecasting. We should be fine, even with the demand that we're seeing not only in Long Island but also in New York City. But nevertheless, as you go on the outer years, we realize that new projects and new supply points are right now we only have 3 supply points into Long Island. But we feel with those 3 supply points, we're able to get and hedge through other markets enough supply to hold us for at least another 10 to 15 years. So in terms of supply, we're good on our side. Obviously, the big kicker is that if something happens out at the forks, that's where the need for new entry point. So we feel good with that. In terms of EE and renewables, it's a great story for us on the gas side of the business in that Long Island, we usually get 3-year agreements with the Public Service Commission that funds our energy efficiency programs. Long Island's program was, the funding ran out in year 2. That's how great the demand was for energy efficiency on Long Island. We recently got approval to extend the program for another 3 years. So we'll be back out there starting up energy efficiency projects. One of them is in Port VA that we talked about. It's a project that saves the hospital now $1 million, over $1 million a year. So when you look at it, it's impactful. And it's a program that we definitely need to continue to fund. Another project that we recently completed, one of the things we can do as a utility is have what we call a utility services contract with any large customer who's looking to either do some boiler upgrades, some energy efficiency upgrades to reduce their energy costs. We act as the project manager for a fee. So if they are a customer of ours or not, we can still get these contracts in-house because we have the expertise in terms of to do that. One great story was the Brookhaven National Laboratories, where they went through a $15 million upgrade to this system energy efficiency upgrade to their boiler controls, their boiler systems, and now their first year, they saw savings of over $1 million. So we look to do that with other large customers on that one as well. And then renewables, we love to have a great story here on Long Island, but actually the great story is in our New York City jurisdiction where we have a biogas project that is funded by National Grid, working with the City of New York, their largest wastewater treatment plant. So you guys may not know, but the byproduct of sewage is methane. So what we're doing, we're partnering with the City of New York to build what turns out to be a cleaning system. So instead of flaring out and burning it out to the atmosphere, we're capturing that methane, cleaning it, making it pipeline quality, and pumping it into our system. So we'll be able to, with that plant alone, serve 2,500 customers on our system. So So projects like that, we have spoken to Nassau County. They were very interested, and we brought in our experts, internal experts, to sit with them and very preliminary talks, but it's something that, and I believe there's a plant in Yaphank that's looking for food waste in order to biogas a plant. Projects like that are something that, again, we talk about supply, what plants you have there. I think sewage is, there's a lot of supply of that, I guess, right? But anyway, those types of projects are the ones that help us with our supply forward as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to, I guess,
Just to point out, Mike, that National Grid plays two roles, actually, and played a third. National Grid not only owns the gas system, but also owns the large baseload generating plants that I mentioned before. And they were the manager of the electric system for LIPA. They succeeded Keyspan when I was at LIPA, and now they were succeeded by PSE&G Long Island. So they play roles on both sides of the aisle. And in fact, the head of National Grid, international head, who's a great guy, Steve Holliday, is retiring in June. So it's interesting. All right, Ross, you want me to switch?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Well,
Just to let you know, the panel isn't until 12:30, it says Vision Line.
What's that?
The panel isn't until 12:30.
thank you.
Okay, well, we got 25 minutes.
Well, I'm going to try to go over here so I can
You
see
want
this
this?
slide. No, I can actually look up and you can look up. Richie raised three very important issues: cost, supply, and the environment. And I think on Long Island, energy, as Richie well knows, is a bit of a parlor game. Everybody is an expert and everybody has an opinion. And what I'm going to try to do today is give some facts that you can base your own opinions on, based upon what's happened over the last 50 years. So, first of all, 2/3 of Long Island's generation is over 50 years old. So think about it. If you had a taxi fleet, 2/3 of your cars were over 50 years old. And these things rotate at 3,600 RPMs, which is very fast, and they don't have the telemetry, they don't have the computerization, so they really are very old. I'm going to talk about it from the point of view of cost. I'm going to talk about it from the point of view of the environment, and I'm going to talk about it from the point of view of supply, which will answer Richie's questions. And nearly half of Long Island's energy every day comes from off of Long Island. I'll talk about that a bit. The old plants are expensive for a bunch of reasons, which I'll go into. Property tax is very high. Operation maintenance costs very high. Very inefficient in the use of fuel. And there are a lot of environmental concerns, which I'll review. There's only one modern plant on Long Island, which I'm proud to say is the Caithness plant. And that supplies 11% of Long Island's electricity, even though we're only 5% of the installed capacity on Long Island. To give you a contrast, New York City, which has about a 50% higher in-city requirement, about 9,000 megawatts versus 6,000 megawatts on Long Island, has 5 new power plants supplying New York City. Long Island only has 1. So we're behind the curve on modernizing the fleet. New York City is behind the rest of the country on modernizing the fleet. So what are the old plants? Well, the old plants were really built for coal, most of them. The only one not built for coal was Northport. You can see the conveyor belt. And as I said, they don't cycle well. Some of them actually have manual fuel injection, where workers go up to the top of the steam boiler and shoot the oil in. They're not computerized. They're not modern. And you can see the average age of them. I'm going to go fast. I'm going to put this on our website, so if you miss some things, you'll be able to get it. So I just want to let you know. And Richie described what happened after World War II. GIs came home, Levittown was built, we were building power plants. Northport 4 came on in 1978. This big gap you see here is where Shoreham should have been. Didn't happen. Richie came in, caused the building of a whole bunch of small plants. Finally, with the Caithness plant in 09, the first modern plant since Northport 4 in 1978. So as I say, 2/3 of Long Island's generation, 2/3 of it is 50 years and older. Somebody said you don't put solar collectors on a leaky roof. I mean, we have a leaky roof on Long Island. You have DC cables that Richie was instrumental in putting into Long Island. And then you see Caithness way over there, 5% of this of installed capacity, and solar maybe about 1% going up over time. But look what happens when you actually look what the plants are used. Even though Caithness 1, it's not just Caithness, it would be any modern plant, it backs out all the old plants. So some of the old plants, like Port Jeff 4 or Port Jeff 3, they operate 2-3% of the time. But we're paying taxes year-round on them. So the question is, what do we want as our energy future? And that's part of what PSE&G is doing in this integrated resource plan. And people don't know this, but 45% of Long Island's energy every day comes in over cables. From Connecticut, from New Jersey, from upstate New York. So, how good are these cables? It's interesting, people think cables are very reliable. They're pretty reliable, Richie. But when you look at their worst years are pretty bad. Northport to Norwalk was 40% in 2010, 40% available. The Cross Sound was 76% available in 2014. And the new Neptune cable, 71% available in 2012. So the average availability is in the 80s. Caithness 1 equivalent availability, 99%. So people say cables are more reliable than power plants. The figures don't really show that. Very interesting. Now, what does a new power plant do, any new power plant? Well, first thing it does is it actually physically saves fuel. You're burning less fuel to make the same kilowatt hours. You're burning 1/3 less fuel. So what happens is, it's a 750 megawatt power plant. It's the equivalent of saving the annual natural gas usage of 200,000 homes on Long Island. So you're lowering gas use. So if you don't like fracked gas, you should like a new power plant, because you're going to use less fracked gas on Long Island in a new power plant because you're using less gas overall. And secondly, it saves a lot of money, which I'll get to. Third, getting to one of Neil's points and one of Richie's charges here, talk about the environment. Look at the profile difference between an old plant and a new plant on emissions. 98% reduction in NOx, 90% reduction in CO. On our plant, we can barely detect any carbon monoxide coming out of the plant. It's so clean that the telemetry is struggling to detect CO. And reduction of CO2, Neil will talk about this, about 2.4 million tons, 2.4 tons a year. Is that right, Neil? I'm looking at the figure. Yep. 1.1, okay, let's I think we corrected. So this is just more figures. I'm going to skip over them real briefly. Barrett, Northport, Port Jeff, emissions profiles. And then you look at reductions from a Caithness 2, base case to Caithness 2 in service, 20% reduction in NOx, 37% reduction in CO2, and next one, a major savings. Here it is, Neil. Your figure is about 1 million tons a year of CO2 with Caithness 2 coming online. And Neil will talk about the governor's goals and how this fits in. So what has happened when new power plants have come into the market? As New York City, with Paletti, with Astoria, with Ravenswood, with Caithness 1, with other new power plants, emissions, the airshed's actually getting cleaner and cleaner. And the New York ISO has shown this in the emissions going down. If you look at the very bottom, particulate matter 2.5 microns, we've gone from non-compliance with the primary ambient air quality standards to compliance. That means the air now, from the point of view of PM 2.5, is healthy to breathe for asthmatics, for the elderly, for infants. And that wasn't true when the old power plants were dominating the scene. So new power plants are actually cleaning up the airshed significantly. And what else do we do? We also use a lot less water. We're producing 11% Long Island's electricity with the equivalent of 3 garden hoses of makeup water. 3 garden hoses to produce 11% of Long Island's electricity. Let's look at the old plants though. What are they doing? The old plants, this is gallons per megawatt hour. Caithness is down there. Northport's 10 times more. Barrett's 15 times more. And Port Jeff is around 52 times more groundwater use to produce 1 unit of electricity. So it's enormous, enormous difference in water use. And what else do the old plants do? They kill the fisheries. This is DEP figures on the amount of juveniles and adult fish that are being killed. Billion. And impingement on the screens, because they have once-through cooling where they're pulling water out of the western bays or the Long Island Sound, so it's a decline of our fisheries. We don't do any of that. So fuel savings from new plants because they're more efficient. Next one. Property taxes. Let's look at property taxes. If you look at Caithness 1, comparing it to the property taxes per megawatt hour, you can see what we're up against in terms of the cost per megawatt hour. Dramatically more expensive to operate and maintain those old plants. And you have huge problems of obsolescence. The parts are difficult to find, the control systems aren't supported by the original equipment manufacturers, and some of the rotors are reaching the end of their rotor life, and it's dangerous to even be in the room when they're spinning. So it's very difficult. And what about Superstorm Sandy? Barrett was underwater. I mean, these plants are located on the coastline because they were using once-through cooling for the internal uses. Now that's a terrible place to be for a power plant. You want it at 100 feet in the middle of the island like Caithness 1 or 2, where you're not prone to flooding and you're away from the coastline. And we can do that now because we have modern cooling systems which weren't around 50, 100 years ago. That's why all the old plants along the Hudson River, the Pacific Ocean, the Mississippi River, the Gulf of Mexico, because they used those bodies of water. That was sensible then, it's no longer sensible now. So, get to the end here, Richie. The final point, can the existing fleet continue to provide capacity for the foreseeable future? Well, we'll see what PSE&G says in their IRP process. I hope they're doing a strong study of that. But they haven't made their analysis of the old plants public that they did. They've been asked to do that. And we know that the operating costs are higher, air emissions have gone through all these things. So this is going to be part of the IRP process. Next one. And as Richie was talking about, they said, well, you know, we have too many power plants on Long Island under contract. It's costing the ratepayers all this money. But their August report didn't consider the savings from the new plants at Caithness, didn't consider the savings from the retirement, for instance, at Glenwood Landing and for Rockaway, which the PSC said was worth $250 million to the ratepayers. That's just that one act, I like it. And the regional greenhouse gas savings and all the environmental benefits. So this is the choices we have on Long Island. Do we want the old plants or do we want modern technology? And of course, they say we don't need new plants until 2025 at the earliest, but you mentioned that. But I'd suggest there are some other considerations that we have to look at. Not unimportant: jobs, economic development, and local tax base, and keeping our workers employed. Now, you wouldn't build a power plant just to do that, but I suggest that you can do that and actually save the ratepayers money. So I guess my thesis is we need to replace the old dirty plants. Can't be done with renewable storage and our REV alone. Neil can talk about that. And we can't achieve some of the goals for greenhouse gas savings without it. And I think the experience of Caithness 1 is proof of the pudding that bringing a new plant online can really make a big difference to both rates and the environment. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Russ. Mike? We're going to have questions in a few minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to keep my comments shorter since I'm a sort of a substitute. I'm stepping in and filling the role for one of the speakers that couldn't make it. What I wanted to talk about, since the workshop is looking to the future, is where we headed. So one of the goals, you know, with this terrible tragedy in Paris recently, is a question as to whether or not the conference that was planned for December, they're going to have a summit to set goals for reducing greenhouse gases. And a real sort of, there was a building towards this summit that there was a feeling that they might actually reach some more meaningful conclusions than was the case in previous summits. So it's something that we'll have to see what they do in terms of whether they move ahead with that or not. But the goals that they're operating under is the scientific community is saying we want to achieve an 80% reduction in CO2 by the year 2050. Now, of course, 2050 still feels like a very long time away. So what some have done is to take that number and say, well, what would that mean in a more reasonable planning window? So for 2030, which is only 15 years away, the goal that is commonly used is to say we want to see a CO2 reduction of 50%. The state of New York adopted a 40%. So they've made it as their state energy plan, our state energy plan, says we want to see a 40% reduction in CO2 by the year 2030. So now, how does that relate to some of the numbers that Ross just reviewed and the discussion we've been having here? Clearly, natural gas does play an important part of this. Let me mention them first so I don't forget you, because it is true. It is true that sometimes the energy issues are broken into the heating versus electric, and we kind of overlook the heating. But on Long Island, for example, we have 60%, or approximately, but more than half of the homes are still using oil, which from a greenhouse gas impact perspective is dramatically higher. So one of the most dramatic things any homeowner can do is to convert to natural gas. There was discussion of limitations of sometimes people can't do that because they're not in an area that has the service. But many people do have the service and could look into making that conversion. So that's one thing to just put on the table right away. But in the electric sector, when we say we want to get these numbers, part of it has got to be reducing through efficiency. So we can all do our part with our own choices at home and business. And I do have a table downstairs I mentioned earlier. I want to encourage all of you to stop by. It's called Long Island Green Homes. Very easy to find on the web also. It's just longislandgreenhomes.org. But it's relevant to this discussion because about half of the homes on Long Island were built before we had an energy code in 1970, which means they just leak heat tremendously. Many of the homes you go into them, the attics have little or no air sealing. So that could be half of the homes on Long Island. That's a tremendous number. There's another statistic that says perhaps a quarter or more than a quarter, some 250,000 homes have heating systems that are like 30 years or more. So that means it's sort of the description that Ross was making of the old power plants. They're just highly inefficient and not at all modern, and you could achieve a lot by. So we encourage you to go through a home energy audit. Many people hesitate because it's a little complicated, but that's what our Long Island Green Homes program is about, is to provide resources to help people walk through the process. A not-for-profit person that will talk to you over the phone, not trying to make a sale, just trying to help you take advantage of the program. So that's the efficiency part. We could all do more on efficiency, and it should start with our homes. But the other part is renewables. Clearly, we want to see more renewables, and we look at the system, and there's a push for 100% renewables as a political goal, as an environmental strategy. But really, when you look at a system the size of Long Island's or New York State's, it's hard to envision that we're going to hit 100% renewables in that 15-year window, for example. In fact, really what you want to do is you want to build with renewables at a rate that kind of sort of matches this decreasing cost rate, which is, tricky to do, but it's generally been the goals. We often hear the term market transformation, and what we're seeing now is the fruits of many labors in the sense that Richie mentioned being out in front and pushing solar years ago, and how it was a big deal when we had that 1,000 house, and we did a press conference that a number of us were at, and we said 1,000, it's a real number, whatnot. They did 12,000 solar homes on Long Island last year, or the year we're in alone. So it has this sort of curve to it that we want to see really take off as market transformation is achieved. But a lot of that market transformation is also driven by political policies that are going to get stuck. So we have a tax law at the federal level that is key. It reduces your cost by 30% on purchasing a solar system. That runs out at the end of 2016. So any of those of you that have been sort of on the, what's the term here, you've sort of been holding out or thinking about going solar and you haven't, you really should be stepping up and considering that. The solar is one part of the renewables. We do have geothermal on Long Island. We should be aware it's a very real alternative source of providing heat to the homes. Primarily a applicable to businesses because it can be expensive, but it works really well if you're building a new business, a new hotel or something like that, you put geothermal in. A number of colleges, like Adelphi College, has got geothermal systems all over the college. Really impressive. So there's a lot of potential there. There are some cost issues. So then you come back to our basic electric generation as this big other element. And you say, if the experts are telling us we got to get to this 80% reduction, or even half of that, a 40% reduction in the next 15 years, you know, frankly, on some level, we need to be honest, we're not on path for that. There's just no way that we're on track for that as we sit here today. As a matter of fact, PSEG is responsible for doing an integrated resource plan, which is a plan where it's supposed to be a 10-year plan with a 20-year vision. So that would definitely be that 15-year time period. And one of my questions was, well, are you guys going to write a plan that achieves the goal from the state of this 40% CO2 reduction? And at first they were kind of sort of, you know, kind of thrown that they, well, I don't want to characterize their comment, but I think at this point they're saying they will show in their plan some scenarios that will achieve that goal. But clearly the thrust of the plan is to show the way you can generate electricity that's as cheap as possible in the short term. And let's face it, that's the attitude of a lot of ratepayers out there. They don't want to see anything that costs anything more. And so, you know, if we're going to get to this 15%, in 15 years we're going to get to a 40% reduction, and we're going to do it in a way that doesn't result in significant rate increases, you kind of stop and you sort of say to yourself, well, you know, we got old power plants that we're still relying on. And so, you know, I did an analysis and spoke at the environmental impact statement hearing, which they had for Caithness 1 some 8 years ago or so, if I remember my numbers right, and then again more recently at the Caithness 2 last year or so. And when we sat down and crunched the numbers, what we were struck by was the CO2 reduction from having a modern baseload power plant is tremendous. So what we showed is you're talking about 1.1 million metric tons of CO2 that are not going to be emitted into the air if the plant becomes part of the grid, part of our electric system off the ground. What that number means, it's hard to sort of nail down. People compare it to you know, cars on the road and things like that. But frankly, if you take what we're reducing currently with all of our efforts, which means the solar program, which is primarily the residential, because most of the large stuff is still not online today. So if you look at today's numbers on an annual basis, what would be achieved with Caithness 2 is dramatic. It's basically 700% higher. I mean, it's orders of magnitude higher. And so the question becomes, if we're going to achieve the goals in the state energy plan, really we should be using an aggressive strategy of promoting efficiency all across the board, providing incentives, providing lower cost interest rates. The interest rates, by the way, that they're providing are going up rather than keeping them low. The incentives are not that great, let's be honest. A 10% incentive on like a $10,000 retrofit, it's not that great. It's a decent program. I earlier made the pitch for you all to go to the table. It could be stronger. We could be doing a lot more policy-wise. But you still come back to, I mean, we have real questions about where solar is going to be at when renewables lose the benefit of these federal tax reduction, which is really significant, that 30% number. And the assumption is that our leaders in Washington will do nothing. Whether that's a fair assumption or not remains to be seen, but the perception is they're going to let it run out. If that's the case, that's really, I think, this big growth we've seen in solar, we may see sort of a flattening for a few years before it can start to go back up again, which is really unfortunate. But the larger scale solar is coming to Long Island. We do what you call ground mounted or utility scale, where you can have 5, 10, in the case of one of the projects that we were talking about at the earlier workshop, 25 megawatts in one site. That's pretty big, that's for solar, that's a serious field. And if you look at the equation of how do we get to those numbers, you have to have a certain number from growing the residential solar, a certain number from growing the commercial solar in terms of businesses putting it on their roofs. But then you need this other solar that is sort of the larger fields, it's the standalone ground-mounted solar. And then we need wind. Wind needs to be part of the equation. Wind still, has to overcome some cost issues in terms of, both the large-scale solar, wind, they're both at about, say, from a wholesale level, they're in the range of like 16 cents right now, which is about double what you get out of a power plant at a wholesale rate. So, but the curves are going in the right direction, whereas the fossil fuel plants, the curves don't necessarily, there's no expectation for big reductions. We've had a big reduction, which was the recent reductions in natural gas prices. So we're probably at like one of the best prices you'll see from fossil fuel, especially if it's operating out of an old plant. So, I mean, I think the power plants we have on Long Island, I recall Richie Kessel being at workshops where myself and Gordy Mitraki and other people asked the question, and this is going on 10 years ago or so, and we would say, you got a bunch of these old power plants that are just terrible in terms of air emissions. And we often, when we talk about CO2, the state has goals for that. There aren't the goals for the other air quality issues, and those are very real. The particulate matter is usually listed as PM 2.5 or PM 25 or whatever. That will kill people. That causes heart attacks. And reducing that emission from power plants has this really significant quality of life improvement that we never talk about. The idea that people can go out jogging on Long Island and not be as worried about a air quality alert day. These are very real things, and if we keep operating the old plant, we're not going to get the benefits we could get from cleaning up the emissions. So, my conclusion is we need all of these things. We need to retrofit maybe 2 of the old plants, build 1 significant baseload addition. If you add that all up, you could get to a level where perhaps 50% of the energy is generated from combined cycle, whereas right now it's a 5% capacity, but only a 10 or 11%. So let's get that 11 up to like 50% coming from combined cycle. Let's shoot for 50% for renewables from all the other categories that I said. And then, 30, 40 years as we start to approach the 2050, then we can talk about trying to go even further than that. But I think in many respects, the additional goals will be to move transportation into the electric, because now you made the electric cleaner. Now you want more electric cars. We want to promote electric cars and electric trucks, and maybe not the really large trucks, but there's a lot of opportunity for electric vehicles. So, I mean, I just jump in with my few thoughts. I do think the state has set some good goals. It's unfortunate that you get the impression that a lot of people are ignoring them. They only adopted them a few months ago, and to go to a meeting and hear that they're doing major planning and they're not even looking at the goals adopted only a few months ago, to me, we should be pushing. At 40% in 15 years, there's not 100 different ways we can get there, but there are several different scenarios. Let's start to talk about those scenarios. And I do think it's doable, but it requires some real leadership, and it may require some modest rate increases in the short term that have long-term benefits, because you're using so much less fuel in the long term that every year after you're saving money. But I do think there are some difficult challenges. I don't want to say it's all rosy. What's been accomplished with solar in the last few years is tremendous. But our offshore wind project has largely been stymied by various things, and what's going on in Washington is not helpful. We are hoping there'll be a new policy, a new goal, like I said, coming out of this summit, and maybe they will move towards some kind of, those of us that follow this stuff believe there should be either a straight-out tax, a carbon tax, which I know is politically very difficult to do. But the truth is, if you really sat down and analyzed it, what it could do for us would be tremendous. Because all those fuel savings that Ross was talking about, where you can get 40% less in terms of the amount of fuel you're using for the same amount of megawatts, well, if there's a tax, it would really push everybody to make those conversions. But instead, the numbers are still challenging without those, without that kind of policy that provides leadership.
Thank you, Neil. Couple of questions. Yes, this gentleman, then in the back.
Mr. Amy,
Can you just stand up so we can hear you and just tell us where you are?
Henry Tobin, Deputy Mayor of North Baltimore. You made a very compelling presentation.
Thank you.
And of course, you had to go through it very quickly.
I apologize.
So I couldn't absorb almost all the numbers. with the efficiencies that you gain with a new plant,
Yes.
that, as you talked about, Caithness. If Long Island built with those overcapacity, would the efficiency, would the savings be enough that we could then export energy, as we're now importing?
Very interesting question, and complicated answer. I'll try to give you the simple part of it. At various times of the year, absolutely. So in the winter, Long Island could be making money, saving ratepayers dollars by selling power to Connecticut, by selling power to New Jersey. Those cable flows don't have to always be us being the colony back to the master country.
It's alternating currents.
Some of them are DC, some of them are AC, but we can definitely reverse them and reserve the capacity and have it flow the other way. So we've done some studies looking at that. We don't push Caithness 2, for instance, as an export facility, because people on Long Island say, well, we don't want a power plant. Some of them do. But there are those possibilities at various times of the year, maybe at night, maybe weekends. You know, I was up in Connecticut when we were looking at Caithness 2, talking about bringing a new line, a gas line, down into Shoreham, Iroquois, and actually LIPA started going into that process until it was called off. And the commissioner at the DEC up in Connecticut, Department of Environmental Conservation and the Environment, was delighted. He said, you know, the one thing I'm worried about when we built the Crosstown cable and the Norwalk to Northport cable was you were going to suck all the energy out of Connecticut. He said, I would love to help you be supportive of a new power plant on Long Island because you'll do more your share. And my rates will moderate, even if I take from you part of the time, because I'll be taking from a modern plant. So it's very interesting.
Okay, so I'm disappointed to hear you gloss so quickly over the wind power, because as you point out, we're at a critical junction. And so you're talking about massive capital investment. This is the time that you choose. What kind of capital investment will we make? Will we make plants that still continue to use fossil fuel, or will we make plants that can be supplied by the offshore wind power? My understanding is, and I forget the numbers exactly, but it can generate 700 megawatts of power. That's the memory I have in my head. That's what I believe, which is, and in any case, way more than a nuclear power plant, which I think generates 500 megawatts. I'm bad at math, but I remember the numbers being phenomenal. So I don't understand, and in terms of going forward, National Grid and PSEG have the critical role to play, because my understanding is to get the application approved from the powers that be, the federal government that controls the leases, there has to be an agreement to buy, unlike the fossil fuel company that don't need a purchaser at the other end of the deal before they get their application approved. So, why isn't PSEG and National Grid pushing for that? Because, as you said, this is the critical moment in time. You either make an investment in an economy that's still based on fossil fuel, or you go forward to renewable.
Right. Let me answer on the wind part. First of all, the project that was proposed was not 700, it was 140 megawatts. That at the time, ultimately...
Wait, may I ask, are you talking about the old one that was, this is the new program?
Well, the new one, which
is
I
completely
started,
different.
with new one, which I started when I was at the State Power Authority, which is a consortium with LIPA and Con Edison. I don't think Con Ed has any interest in it whatsoever. It's not 700 megawatts.
Well, it was 350 megawatts, but it does have, the discussion would be that it could potentially go to 700. So
Well, the bottom line is, I would have loved to have seen it happen. I think it's passed us by. First of all, there's a competitive process now for a lease that's going to take another 2 years. The project at $350 million would likely cost about $5 billion for 350 megawatts.
It would cost,
For about $5 billion for 350 megawatts. So the first thing is the cost is astronomical. The first project that was rejected, which was almost fully permitted by the state and federal government, and Neil was a great supporter and helper in trying to get that done, would have cost about $825 million. At the end, originally I think it was $350 million. $825 million for 140 megawatts. I do think there is a market for offshore wind, but I think it's on a much smaller scale than what was being looked at the time. So while I think offshore wind is great, we try to get it done, I'm being honest with you, I don't see it in Long Island's future for a long
That's
time.
ridiculous.
I don't know, anyone want to add?
Yeah, well, Caithness has an 850 megawatt wind farm in Oregon. So we're very much in the wind business. We have 338 450-foot tall wind machines, 2.5 megawatts each.
Could you repeat?
We're on 32,850 megawatts. 850
turbine?
338. The base rings weigh 21 tons, just to hold the tower to the concrete pad. It's a complicated business. It's an expensive business. We're on 32,000 acres. That's probably half of Nassau County. That's how big the wind farm is, so there's not spoilage between the various wind machines. Because if you put them too close together, the wind gets spoiled. And we had problems with the Air Force. We had problems with all sorts of things. No technology is free, quote, free. There's always issues. So we are very pro-wind. I think Richie is right, however. The complications of starting a offshore wind business in the United States should be something that's a cooperative process with the federal government. For instance, you need ships that can both build the wind machines and tend to the wind machines. We aren't even allowed to bring the ships over from Europe because of the Jones Act, which only allows American bottoms. So we don't have the ships to actually build the wind projects at the economics we need. Secondly, you need the infrastructure on transmission to bring the wind not just from the wind farm to the shore, but from the shore to the load. And there's been a number of proposals to invest. I mean, Google has one to start a whole offshore transmission system that would assist it. So I'm in favor of offshore wind. I think you're looking at a time frame of 7 to 20 years. In 20 years, we'll probably have 1,000 megawatts off the East Coast. But it's going to take that long, both the permitting, the infrastructure, the support, etc. So it's not a negative. It's only money.
I want to thank you, Ross. I want to thank everyone for coming and our panelists, Neil, Ike, Ross, for attending. Hope everyone has a happy Thanksgiving and it's lunchtime.